What's up, guys? Gun here. Today, we're going to have a little fun, but also hopefully learn some stuff. We're going to talk about how to win $1 million. Oh, man. Oh, man. You should hit the thumbs up just how incredible of a title that is. But what we're talking about is the Millionaire Maker on DraftKings. It has been their flagship contest for as long as I can remember. You can expect it in the lobby every week of the season. And it usually sits around the $20 entry fee. Sometimes they do promotional. I think we've seen a $3 Millie Maker before, a $10, and then a few times a year you'll see the stakes go up to like $300. But right now, sitting at $20 and usually at $20. So that's kind of what we're going to be thinking about as we do this little case study on how to win the Millionaire Maker. If you guys are unfamiliar with DraftKings, DraftKings.com is a daily fantasy sports website, much like FanDuel.com. Yahoo has a daily fantasy site as well. For those of you that maybe play season long and been looking to branch into daily fantasy, a contest like this is going to catch your eye as you open up the lobby, and rightfully so. It's $1 million at first, but it is a lot of people you have to beat. 294,117 lineups could be in this contest this week in the Millie Maker, which is astronomical odds. You're going to find much better plus EV profitable contests in the lobby of DraftKings and other sites, but no other contest will give you $1 million. So how can we fight these astronomical odds and increase our odds of winning $1 million? I think the best way to do this is to look at previous lineups and maybe draw some correlations and some percentages, and that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. I'm Gun, twitter.com/GundackerSports, man. If you guys enjoy some of the content in this video or any of the videos on my channel, please hit me with a thumbs up and subscribe. I have a premium service at rundfs.com. If you guys think I sound like I know what I'm doing, I have opened up the doors to all the spreadsheets, and the spreadsheets that we use in this video you guys will have full access to as a premium subscriber. If you're looking to get in or expand your horizons in daily fantasy sports, you can go to rundfs.com, sign up, check out VIP passes, man. We got them in all shapes and sizes, week, 2 weeks, month, and then promotional packages depending on when you see this video. We have a package to get you locked in until Super Bowl Sunday, and an MVP package that a longtime subscriber asked me to make, and this will get you locked in until the end of NBA. And what these will do, it will unlock access to 24/7 Discord, my premium Discord, with so many chats for all these fantasy sports topics and voice chats and whatnot. People are playing college football tonight. There's tennis. There's going to be hockey, UFC. The three sports that I spearhead: baseball, football, and basketball. And you guys know how we do all day long, all day strong, man. We get it done. We grind, and I share a lot of my goodness. All of my goodness in my spreadsheets. I post my specific player pool, my tiers, all that good stuff, and really easy to read, sortable data pertaining to stats for players that we can select from. Really good stuff. Game notes, all that good stuff, man. I don't want to take up too much time in this video plugging it, but if you guys want to add this to your repertoire of tools, your arsenal of weapons as you attack your daily fantasy sports contests every week, man, I definitely encourage you guys to come test out a week pass or lock in long term for bulk savings. One quick note: we do have voice chats every Saturday night for NFL. We'll discuss strategy, we'll discuss plays, lineups, contests that we're entering, and then of course we have those daily voice chats every day before baseball lock when applicable, and every day before NBA lock. So not only are you getting access to written data or sortable spreadsheet data, but you actually get to hook up a microphone or put on a pair of headsets, listen in, and chat with us. And it's a really beautiful, beautiful community. Let's talk about how to win $1 million. So here's what we did. And this is a spreadsheet that you guys can have in the VIP Discord. There's a link to it. I went back and got the winning lineup from every regular season Millie Maker in the last 2 years. Had 15 in 2017 and had 17 in 2016. And I wrote down every player, price, percentage owned that player was owned. And my goal here is to do a case study, studying the lineups, and come up with some correlations that we can't deny, right? So if we got to beat out 250,000 entries, what's going to give us a better chance to at least have a shot? I think there's ways to increase our odds of being competitive, even though it is still an astronomical hill to walk upon, right? So the last 2 seasons are all listed in here, and I have a couple of anomalaic notes, and then of course I accumulated a lot of data and percentages. So I'm not going to go through every single winning lineup here, but we might stop on a couple of maybe outliers and then a couple of examples of some of the winning ways that people use, strategy, lineup techniques that people use. So 2018, 2017, let's go all the way to Data Tracker, and let's look at some percentages that I found looking at these 32 lineups that won users $1 million. So first of all, let's talk about team stacking. In lineups that had at least 2 players from the same team, there was 19 lineups that had at least 2 players from the same team. A lot of this is quarterback based, but every now and then you see guys with 2 receivers or a running back, receiver, tight end, something like that. But most of this is going to be a handcuff to a quarterback. So of lineups that had 2 players from the same team, we had 19. That's 59.38% of these 32 lineups that had a correlation of 2 guys on the same team. 8 lineups had at least 3 players from the same team. That's a quarter of lineups. 4 lineups had at least 4 players from the same team. That's crazy. That's 12.5%. I did not track any lineups with 5 players from the same team. However, I do believe there was a week where there was 4 players in that team's defense, but I didn't really consider a defense as the same a player on the same team. So game stacks. So here's what game stacks mean in regards to this spreadsheet. How many lineups had X amount of players from the same game with at least 1 person from both teams in the game? So two game stack would mean there was 1 person on one team, 1 person on the other team. 5 lineups had lineups like that. 15.63% had a lineup where they ran it back player versus player. So let's talk about examples for this. I'll go back to 2018 week 5, and we'll see that we had Austin Hooper tight end versus James Conner running back, Falcons versus Steelers. And you'll find that it wasn't this lineup still honors like a quarterback receiver handcuff technique, but still found another way to grab positive correlation with 2 players going against each other in a potential high total game. Hooper 3K that week put up 16.7 fantasy points at just under 8% owned. And then James Conner, 7,500, a pass catch. It sounds crazy looking back at it, right? A pass catching running back, 7,500 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, dropped almost 40 fantasy points at under 17% owned. So great example of 2 players running it back and not even including a quarterback. And then we had 3 lineups with at least 3 players from the same game. That's 9.38% of the time, and we'll have plenty of examples of that. That'll be quarterback and a receiver versus a receiver from the other team, something like that. 2 lineups in the last 2 seasons with at least 4 players from the same game. You'll see a lot of that as well. A lot of quarterback 2 receiver stacks versus opposing wide receiver, stuff like that, where you really run it back. And then this is where it gets really wild. 5 players from the same game 3 times in the last 2 years. That's almost 10%, closer to 9%. And then 6 players from the same game 2 times in the last 2 seasons. That's 6.25. So almost 16% of lineups that have won $1 million were full-fledged game stacks. We're talking soggy bottom boy. Let's go back to 2018 week 2 is what I got. And I wrote 5 game stack, but just 1 Steeler to run it back. So this counts, right? Week 2. Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback, running back, Kareem Hunt, wide receiver, Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce, tight end. Very, very, very few times can you write a scenario where your quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end will be the nuts to win you $1 million against 200,000 lineups. But it happened in week 2 of last year, and they ran it back with Juju Smith, the receiver for the Steelers. So if you have a full-on onslaught, definitely makes sense correlation-wise to have at least one player running it back to try and keep it close. If you put a game script in your head, Steelers maybe play from behind a lot, and they have to toss it to a wide receiver a lot. A lot of people maybe would have liked to fit in Antonio Brown. It looks like salary would have been an extreme problem here, but Juju Smith, 6,400, much more approachable and attainable salary, 34.1 fantasy points that week. So an example of a 5-man, 1-game full stack, and then six-man game stacks. I think the 2 instances I can remember are, I want to say, the Texans and the Seahawks. Let me see if I can verify that. Actually, let me check 2018 week 1. But I think it might have been Texans and Seahawks as well. No, it's right here. Fitzpatrick, Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson. That's 3 players versus Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas. That's actually a 5-man game stack. But a great example of a game stack popping off for $1 million. Let me go to 2019 or 2018 week 16. And this was one of the more unlikely game stacks, or I don't want to say unlikely, but one of the more surprising game stacks that popped off $20 million for 6 players involved. Aaron Rodgers, Jamal Williams, Devontae Adams, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. That's a 4-man Green Bay stack. Running it back with 2 Jets players, Elijah McGuire, Robbie Anderson, was actually incredible. Results winner Cupcake 19 took down $1 million with this full game stack. So there's an example of a 6-man game stack taking home $1 million. And then I want to find Seahawks. I think it was 2017 week 8. I think it was the Seahawks and Texans as the other full game stack that did this. Let's see. Yeah, this is what it was. So this was an afternoon game in Seattle at that. Houston Texans versus the Seahawks. Russell Wilson handcuffed to Paul Richardson, Tyler Lockett, and Jimmy Graham for a 4-man Seattle stack, running it back with Will Fuller and Lamar Miller. An actually crazy lineup. Only 2 players above 11% owned. LaShawn McCoy, Ezekiel Elliott here. So that is the other outstanding example of a full 6-man game stack. So that only happens 6% of the time, but it is still a possibility, and we've seen it at least once the last 2 seasons. Last year, Green Bay, New York, and the season prior, the Jets and the Texans. Now let's talk about salary left. This one's fun because you're going to hear a lot of people who will give you the advice, hey, to win $1 million, to win the big tournaments, you got to leave money on the table to be different. That is far from the case. Matter of fact, I would go as far as to say that is incorrect, highly incorrect. Out of the last 32 millionaire maker winning lineups, 15 of them, almost half, spent every single cent of salary. That's 46.88%. And then 11 of them left just $100 on the table. That's 34%. That is almost 80%. 80% of lineups spent at least $49,000 of their $50,000 salary. So For those, for those guys that are giving you advice to leave a lot of money on the table to win a millionaire maker, that's not necessarily the case, and it's actually far from the case. The most money left on the table, 500 plus, happen once. 3% of the time is what one equates to, and then 5 times $300 was left on the table. So I mean, if your lineup fits, I'm not saying force in yourself to spend all your money, but don't build a lineup thinking you have to leave a buttload of money on the table, because it has not been the case. And this is a decent sample size of 2 seasons where and even in the 3rd season ago, there wasn't a lot of people leaving a lot of money on the table. So don't be afraid to use your salary, and definitely don't believe that you have to leave money on the table to get outlandish enough and different enough to beat out a bunch of lineups. Now let's talk about stack types. If you don't take anything else away from this video, you take this away. Stack types wins tournaments. You absolutely must be approaching your weekly tournament builds with stacking in mind to win long-term in football, to win tournaments long-term in football. Yes, there are weeks where running a quarterback naked works out. That's typically going to be a running quarterback or a really, really cheap quarterback. We'll talk about a few examples there, but you have to have some stacks in mind, and we've already talked about several different stacks that have worked out. Because of this right here, for this season, I'm going to be doing my favorite stacks, or my groups rather, that I've hidden here because it's premium information, of how I'm going to be stacking or grouping my favorite teams on the slate. I think I have like 5 or 6 teams right now, maybe even 8 that I've listed of teams and stack combinations that I'm going to be running this week. So if you guys are just curious to see where I'm at on this, you guys can get unlock access to this with a subscription at rundfs.com. We talked about that at the top of the video. But even past me, I encourage you guys to do something like this and keep ceiling in mind. Don't just stack it a tight end that has a middling range of outcomes. You want some tournament winning upside, so kind of keep that in mind. All right, let's talk about the stack types that paid off. The most common stack type that paid off was one quarterback with one of his receivers. That happened 9 times in the last 2 seasons. That's 28% of the time. And then quarterback receiver, that happened 3 times. That's 9.38% of the last 32 winning lineups. Quarterback, wide receiver, tight end happened twice. Quarterback, tight end, this one is really, really interesting. Happened 18.75% of the time. That is the second most common stack type to win a milli maker. Great examples, guys like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. I think we saw a few times in 2017. Might have seen guys like Cam Newton, Greg Olsen, stuff, combos like that where tight ends play as a wide receiver 1 type in terms of volume and stuff like that. And then, of course, we just talked about how Austin Hooper did well in a game against the Steelers. I don't think Matt Ryan was his handcuff that game, but those are kind of examples of that. So if you're going to honor a 2-man stack with a quarterback and a receiver, don't forget about tight end, because that's the second most popular way to 2-man stack a team and win $1 million. And then how about quarterback running back, right? So this one doesn't seem like a strong correlation because it's not. Likely, or generally speaking, a running back needs to rush touchdowns to get where he needs to go, and the quarterback needs to throw it. In this age of football, we see a lot of pass-catching running backs to kind of shake this up. So Cam Newton, Christian McCaffrey, stuff like that are great examples of maybe a situation where you could play a quarterback and his running back. And then we've got rare examples, but still examples. The quarterback, running back, wide receiver combo. The quarterback, wide receiver, tight end combo. Both happen 1 each. And then the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end combo. I think we just talked about how the Chiefs accomplished that at least once last year. That happened twice in the last 2 seasons. So that's big. Quarterback, running back, receiver happened twice. Quarterback, running back, tight end happened once. I don't know if I just mentioned that. If I did, it was straight from the Department of Redundancy department. And then naked quarterback 4 times in the last 2 seasons. That's 12.5%. Let's talk about a couple examples of naked quarterbacks before we move on to some other stats here. Let me check my notes here. I think we can look at 2017 Week 10. Good example here. Dak Prescott, the only Cowboy in this lineup. 26.6 DraftKings points, 6,700 bucks, 14.18% owned. Was not attached to a correlating player, a pass catcher, not even Ezekiel Elliott. I would assume he ran for a touchdown or something like that in this game. There was, though, a correlation in this game. It was the Giants running back and receiver combo, right? Is that what I had? No, excuse me, the Rams running back and receiver. We got Todd Gurley and Robert Woods, both representing the Rams, made this lineup. So it still kind of honored the 2-man team stack, but it left out the quarterback. So usually you're going to have a quarterback involved in your team stacks, but in this case and in several other examples throughout the season, we've seen, a pair of receivers, a receiver, running back, tight end, stuff like that. Another really common correlation for 2-man team stacks, if you included defenses, you'll see quite a bit of running back defenses with positive correlation. The thought process there being defenses play strong defense, your team's able to get the lead, and then it benefits the running back because you get to run the ball a little bit more, milk the clock out, stuff like that. Any other examples of a naked quarterback? I think I had a random Matthew Stafford one. But I don't think I wrote it in. Yeah, I did. 2017 Week 9. Let's go to this one. Oh, no, that's the one I just wrote. 2017 Week 10? There it is. Matthew Stafford, right? Yeah. Matthew Stafford, Week 10, was the only Lion representative in this Millie Maker lineup for 3D Monkey. Something to note for this one, this was one of the $333 entries, so it's a much smaller field than the usual $20 that we're analyzing. And he needed less than 200 points to win the Millie Maker. So oftentimes we see 200 plus, 230, even I think we saw 300 in week 1 of last season. So in this case, he got away with running Matthew Stafford by himself at almost 7K, dropped 22 fantasy points. Did not have a pass catcher for him, but he did have a Giants running back and a Giants receiver. So again, kind of honoring the 2-man team stack, soaking up some usage, some volume, and some upside from a specific team. Let's go back to the data tracker and let's talk about how people are using their flex position to win the Millionaire Maker. 19 out of 32 lineups that we studied here, that's almost 60% of lineups, used a running back in the flex. That's important because you'll hear a lot of people maybe throughout the week, oh, this is a great 2 tight end week. This is that. Well, running back statistically is your greatest chance of separating yourself. It makes a lot of sense. Running backs are usually a position that we can target the highest floor in terms of volume, and then for DraftKings, and in this day and age, we can really pepper in some running backs that are getting some pass catching looks and a higher volume of targets there. And for PPR, you can really make some points really quickly with a bunch of checkdowns. And because of that, running back was your highest average salary spent in these 32 lineups, $6,800, by far and away the most average money spent. But also flex was $5,756. So flex, your running back is a great process play. And then, of course, wide receiver coming in second, 11 times in the last 32 lineups, 34% of the time. It makes a lot of sense. You're building your PPR there, usually a lot of underpriced receivers, some next man up opportunities. And then lastly, 2 times in the last 32 millionaire makers, a tight end or 2 tight ends helps you bag the 3 commas. Let's go to entries and number of entries. So this one I think you can find some value in as well, and maybe build some hope. A lot of people think you have to run 150 lineups to even have a chance to win $1 million. Well, last 2 seasons, I broke it down. 5 times a person with one lineup in the last 32 millionaire makers won outright. Single bullet, bam, give me my money. That's 15.6% of the time. 6 times a person has won with between 2 and 5 lineups. That's almost 20% of the time. 12.5% of the time, a person has won with 6 to 10 lineups. Once 11 to 10. 4 times 21 to 30. That's 12.5%. 31 to 50 times, 15.63% of the time. And then 9% of the time, a person has won with between 51 and 80 lineups. And only 4 times has a person won with over 100 lineups, whether it be 101 or 150 lineups. That's a 12.5% chance. So don't get discouraged when you open up your millionaire maker and you see some really sharp individuals with max entries, because statistically it doesn't really or historically it hasn't really separated them much in winning first place. Now, statistically and mathematically, a person with 150 entries versus your 1 entry, they probably got a greater individual chance in terms of just math, but don't let that be the discouraging factor here. I mean, you're already facing 250,000 lineups. No one's going to have 1% of the field in something like this. So just shoot your shot and don't overthink that. People have definitely won balling on a budget here. Think about this. What's this? 10, almost half of the last 32 milli makers have won with guys running under 20 lineups. So if you just want to run 10 lineups, you want to run 5, shoot your shot, bro. And then lastly, average salary. We'll talk about quarterback average salary per in the last 2 seasons, $6,000. Running back was your highest prioritized salary spot. $6,800 is your average salary there. Wide receiver, $5,600. That's $17,000 for your 3 positions there. You got to pick 3 of them. Tight end was $4,500. Flex was $5,700. And then lastly, how about this? Defense, $3,000 was your average defensive salary. A lot of people love to punt defense and really chop down, but man, we have seen case after case of higher price defenses really paying off their price point, and $3K and above has been a solid ROI for winning millionaire makers. Now, there's so many more correlations and percentages we can draw from this information. I could go all day, but I thought these were the most interesting ones, the most pertinent ones. So hopefully you found a little bit of value here. I know it's boring to look and hear about numbers and whatnot, but if you guys want to make your own conclusions, your own correlations, again, you can have access to this spreadsheet, look at my data, cross-reference it, find some stuff that you want to look for. I think one of the fun correlations was see how many times a running back and his defense was paired up, or you can also check out average percentage own, and do some chalk checks. A lot of people think you have to avoid the chalk. There's several examples of players like this. Todd Gurley, 35.6% owned. T.Y. Hilton, 32.8% owned. Those are massive chalk numbers for NFL. You can win with chalk in football. You can also track how many times a million maker lineup had a guy that was 1%, 2%. Just about almost every week, you'll find at least one player under 5% owned, or several. So you do have to find some diamonds in the rough and some gems and stuff like that. But I know chalk always has this negative connotation, and I don't think it should, because we've seen chalk take home $1 million quite a bit. So you can find your own correlations. I was looking at how many players were on the road, how many players were at home, was the defense on the road, was the defense at home. So many different fun ways you guys can break it down. It is just 32 games. sample size is subjective. I do think 2 seasons worth is at least enough to draw us in the right direction. We've been around for a few years. A lot of this stuff is still stuff you picked up from 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So hopefully you found a little bit of value here. And like I said, stack types is what I would really focus on, if nothing else. These are great guidelines on how you should build your mass field tournament lineups. I've said it before, I'm not a giant fan of the Millionaire Maker because of the odds to win it, but this is also just great information for other tournaments that are even medium field to large field, because it holds true everywhere you go. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video, man. I really hope you guys had some fun learning some of these numbers. If you guys got anything else for me, twitter.com/GundeckerSports. Remember, every Saturday night, I'm mic'd up. You guys can be mic'd up. Let's talk some football. Let's build some lineups on every site. DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, Fantasy Draft. We have a lot of fun. There's a lot of money to go out there and make out there for NFL fantasy. I love you guys. I'll see you later. Good luck. God bless. Go win some money.